The Cowboys have lost 7 games in a row, and Greg Hardy continues to add to the negative headlines. In a story first reported by Fox Sports and confirmed by ESPN and others, Hardy was late for work last Thursday and missed most of the morning meetings that day as the Cowboys prepared for the Buccaneers, a game that Dallas lost 10-6. Kate, should the Cowboys finally just say enough is enough and cut Greg Hardy?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll be right back in a minute.
Take a break?
Yeah.
Well, let's start from the overarching belief that I don't agree with the fact that the Cowboys signed Greg Hardy in the first place. I don't know why we need to make room for Greg Hardy in the NFL. I think we've had a lot of discussions about how with concussion problems and guys retiring and any team at all, it's kind of like an assembly line. All right, bring in the next guy. We're still going to love football. So I don't understand then why that doesn't apply to Greg Hardy. Like, okay, that brings something negative into the NFL. Why do we need to make space from that? So there's that overarching belief that I've had from the moment Jerry Jones signed Greg Hardy. But I do understand that the NFL is a balancing act, and it always has been a balancing act. And the balancing act is distraction versus talent. And we see this play out all the time in the NFL. We saw it with Terrell Owens when he was doing push-ups on his front lawn. That was okay because of the amount of talent he brought to the wide receiver position. We saw it with Michael Sam. You can debate whether you thought he was talented enough to be in the league, but those GMs were weighing the distraction versus what level of talent he did bring coming out of Missouri. Now you look at Hardy right now. Where is that balance, considering you got a 2-7 football team? Yeah, he's been back for 4 or 5 games. He's playing fine, right? He's got an interception. He's got a few sacks. He's making some tackles. I get it. But then you pile down the distraction level, added with the Deadspin report 10 days ago, 2 weeks ago. To that, numerous altercations with teammates, being late, constant headlines, the pressure that Jerry Jones, whether he feels pressure or not, who knows, he kind of just does what he wants anyway. But when you start piling up one side of the scale versus the other, to me, it tips in the direction of why is Hardy in the league still?
Well, I think there is a contingent of people out there that are represented by the opinion you just gave, which is summed up pretty simply the way you started. You don't think Greg Hardy should be in the NFL. You don't know why the Cowboys signed him. And basically, that has determined the outcome of this analysis for you. You never wanted him there in the first place. So, yeah, the Cowboys should cut him today. But that has no bearing on, granted, a list of things that have occurred with Greg Hardy during his tenure with the Dallas Cowboys, including silly dust-ups over his Twitter handle, whether he was late last Thursday when he was sick, whether he was late again this Thursday, whether he got into a fight with DeMarcus Lawrence on the sideline, whether or not he said something rude or inappropriate in whoever's characterization about Giselle, Tom Brady's wife. All of these things have been made into mountains, when on their own, they're molehills. Now, why have they been made into mountains? Because you didn't want him there in the first place. Now, I'm of the opinion that no matter what industry you're in, whether or not you're a plumber or you're a professional football player, a criminal conviction rarely says you no longer get to participate in that vocation anymore. Rarely. With the fact that Greg Hardy wasn't even convicted, I think it's really, really, I don't know what's going on when people suggest Greg Hardy shouldn't be in the NFL. It's not because I condone domestic violence. Of course I don't. It's not because I forgive Greg Hardy. I don't. If he's guilty, I do not forgive Greg Hardy. But I do not think that also means he has no place in the NFL. And I think that people who, all of these little incidents that come up, it seems like on a weekly basis with Greg Hardy, it's all going back to that. Really, that's what this is about. He was late for Thursday's meeting. Well, you know what? That's just window dressing. That's Christmas ornaments. It's little music down to the chorus of which perhaps you, Kate, and many people want to sing, which is shouldn't be here in the first place. And those two issues should be completely different. What he is to the Dallas Cowboys, whether or not he's a distraction or he's an aid to that team, whether or not he's late to meetings, that should be the merits for Jerry Jones and Jason Garrett to decide whether or not he's helping the team. And it's wholly separate from whether he should be in the NFL at this point.
Couple things. If you don't condone what he did, how are you condemning it then? If you start by saying I don't condone it, but then everything you're saying is defending his spot in it, like in what way are we as a society or media or when we're talking about this actually taking the step to condemn it?
We can condemn it with our speech. It happens to be one of the most powerful things still to this day, while we have it, the most powerful things we have in this country. You don't have, the choice is not either Greg Hardy should never play football again or I love domestic violence. That is a false choice that neither I nor anyone should ever be put in a position of having to choose between. It's whether or not Greg Hardy should be able to participate in his vocation has no bearing on whether I think what he did is wrong. I'll use my words right now in my speech. If he is guilty of what he did, and certainly the Deadspin report and the preliminary court trial, which was then overturned, suggests he did have culpability there, can be condemned with my words. If I can put a similar ridiculous scenario to you, either you say Greg Hardy should be taken, his U.S. citizenship should be taken away, or he should spend the rest of his life in jail, or you condone domestic violence. How would you respond to that?
Okay, two things, though, in addition to that. We just talked in the last block about Ronda Rousey and the fact that what she did was going to create scrutiny. She had to deal with that. She knew that what she did was going to mean that every other little thing she did was more scrutinized. That same theory applies to Greg Hardy. And another thing, when you suggested that I've started at this conclusion to begin with Greg Hardy, where, like, no matter what he does.
But did you not?
No, because if you look at Ray Rice, I don't feel the same way. It's not that I started with one conclusion and then I'm unwilling to change it. With Ray Rice, I do think he deserves a second chance, but I understand that he's an older running back. I understand the reasons that are keeping him there. It's not like I condemned him and then I'm like, you don't get second chance. My point here is that with Greg Hardy, if along the way there was reason to overturn my initial thinking, I would have overturned it.
My only point is you started with the conclusion that Greg Hardy should not be in the NFL, so all these things having to do with whether or not he's late to meetings, that's just window dressing for you. They're not being evaluated on the merits.
There's a scale, and he's piling onto one side of the scale. I'd be willing to say, if he wasn't piling onto that side of the scale, well, look, I get what the NFL is. It's distraction talent, and Greg Hardy's way talented.
On your scale,
but he's actually putting more. He wasn't tipped. He could have earned his way back.
All right, let's move from the devil to the Cowboys Angels. They've lost 7 games in a row, but guess what? According to certain stories, Tony Romo could be back this week against the Miami Dolphins. Can he be the savior that Dallas needs and lead them to the postseason somehow, some way? You have admitted that you're a Cowboys fan. Do you believe that Romo can rack off, what, 7 wins in a row, go 6-1 and get it done?
Let's start by the fact that this entire topic was Will just wanting to talk about how Romo was going to save the Cowboys. So
I think Romo is primed to become the league MVP, perhaps one of the greatest MVPs of all time, rattling off 7 victories, taking the Cowboys to the playoffs, something, by the way, that has never happened. No 2-7 team has ever went on to have a winning record. Would be wonderful. I don't think it's going to happen. They've lost 3 leads and had to tie and 2 more in the fourth quarter. Tony Romo doesn't play on the defense. They've lost 5 games, very winnable in the fourth quarter. Tony Romo doesn't play safety, doesn't play D-line. He won a few of them, not all of them.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, obviously we all know quarterback position is the most important in the NFL, but it's not the difference between 7-2 and 2-7. I mean, we've seen quarterbacks get knocked out for seasons.
But will he have that Willis Reed effect where he comes out and the defense goes, let's rally around it, we can start winning games?
We can hope.
Wow.
I'm sorry. Was that supposed to be quiet? I don't know. I don't know what I was supposed to
Do you
talk
really
about.
believe this, or were you
positing
this question to me?
To
I don't think that that's what's going to happen. Because I don't think the problem with the Cowboys is emotional Tony Romo momentum that they need. I don't think the deficit is some sort of spark that they're getting from missing their leader. I think the deficits are pretty tangible and fundamental to not being that good of a football team right now.
I'll say this. I don't think they have to go 7-0. He has to go 6-1. 8-8 will win that division.
Well, what about the MVP? I think 7-0 if you want the MVP.
7-0 for the MVP. You're right.
Okay.
9-7.
You see his eyes gleaming. He's like a teenager driving for the first time. Johnny Manziel had perhaps his best NFL start ever last week against the Steelers, but his head coach still isn't buying in. Should the Browns make Johnny their permanent starter over Josh McCown? We'll debate next.